Many highly skilled product specialists at Epic Games build webinars focused on many areas of the engine, including Unreal Engine real-time ray tracing for architectural visualization. You can actually go to the webinar series webpage on unrealengine.com and see some of these webinars, including photoreal automotive rendering in Unreal Engine, working collaboratively in Unreal Engine, source control in Unreal Engine, synchronizing Rhino data, Twinmotion one-click, Unreal and Quixel pushing the boundaries of 3D, and many more. We have a great many of these that are available on the Unreal Engine YouTube channel, and you can go to a special playlist called Webinar and see all of these amazing webinars that are still available on that channel for later viewing. Additionally, there is a channel for the Twinmotion webinars that are available as well. Many of these are anywhere between 35 and 50 minutes long and very easy to view and learn from. Please take full advantage of this content. It is a great learning resource. Unreal Fest Online was a special event held by Epic Games on Tuesday, July 14th, 2020. There were 50-some courses that were held by Epic Games experts, taught in a variety of different sections of Unreal Engine, Twinmotion, as well as the Quixel ecosystem. Many of those videos are now available on the Unreal Engine YouTube channel in a special playlist called Unreal Fest Online 2020. If you go to this playlist, you'll be able to see videos including Unreal Engine for Next-Gen Games, which was our feature video for Unreal Engine 5, as well as a great many courses on building worlds for Fortnite, optimizing and building UIs for AAA games, technical animation challenges for mobile titles, speeding up game logic in Unreal Engine, many videos specifically on the use of architectural visualization and real-time ray tracing, automotive workflows, as well as the fundamentals of the engine. We've got some great videos on using linear animation with Control Rig, as well as some great videos on Twinmotion and the Quixel ecosystem. I strongly encourage you to go to this channel if you're interested in virtual production, iPhone development, and enjoy all this great learning taught by experts from Epic Games and our partner companies. This is amazing learning. Make sure you take full advantage of it. Once again, like many things, this is all free. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Educator live stream. It's Friday at 2 p.m. here in Eastern Time. We are in North Carolina, and we are joined by our special guest today, which is Sean Foster, who is the Director of 3D Digital at Rochester Institute of Technology. And we have another exciting live stream. We are also joined, as usual, by Tom Shannon, who is down there for me, and by Mark, who is over on that side, but actually Mark is in London as he usually is, and it's evening in London for Mark. Hi, Mark.
Hi there.
And today we have a really exciting live stream because Sean joins us in the eve of a course that Sean has prepared. And Sean and I go back a long way. And it's really kind of exciting because Sean was one of the first kind of really cool educational mega grants that came across. And he, a while back, Sean's been teaching Unreal Engine at Rochester Institute of Design of Technology, let me say that correctly, for quite some time. And a while back, we started talking about, the work that he'd been doing at RIT, and he's like, hey, and we'll talk about this quite a bit today, but he's like, I've been teaching Unreal, and he's got a YouTube channel, which you can see down here in his, yeah, you can totally see it. And he's been, doing YouTube videos, and he's been teaching his students, and I think his YouTube videos really help. And so we started talking about really teaching Unreal to his junior and senior students, but we started talking about teaching Unreal to students coming in at the freshman and sophomore level, and he's like, I really want to expose Unreal to students coming in at a much younger level. And I was like, well, that's a really great idea. And he then proposed doing this and creating a much larger structured curriculum for Unreal Engine. And, that really led to a lot of stuff. So, but before we get into this whole thing that we're going to talk about to today's stream, why don't you take a few minutes, Sean, and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background? Because here I am getting ready to tell everyone everything about you, and probably you're going to be much better at that than I am. So, say hello, Sean, and tell us
Hey,
a little
thanks
bit
so
about
much,
yourself.
Louis. Great. No, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you. I'm really excited to talk about this course. Got It's taken a lot to put together, right? There's all of these really. It's connected to my interest set, which is where is technology going, and so multi-field can right. Like Epic's Unreal Engine is all that. So perfect litmus test to let me sort of take all these threads and bring them together. So, like you said, I've been teaching at RIT when Unreal 2 is going to it impressed me at how quickly you could put something together and then you didn't have to run. And then within like a few years started releasing these tech demos that were like showed them to some of my friends who were doing post-production for film, and they're like, oh my god, that's almost there. And I was like, yeah, I know, right? And they don't have to render anything. So it was just a matter of time. So started to go towards like virtual production and additional like threads heading out. I'm also really excited about so like I'm in the School of Design, and we are connected to also like industrial design. And so some of my students have already just started naturally, where like some of my students are working with industrial designers and bringing Unreal for product visual, as
Mm-hmm.
well as we have students from of course, the game design school collaborating where skill sets might be coding there, where we have some really great graduate students who are really into the user interface design. Where I love I've taught some of the user interface design classes, and like being able to talk, the graduate students talk like better theory, and then accomplish the technical. So it's just a wonderful experience to be in the center of all of these different fields.
Right, right. So what's kind of cool, I think, is that we've been doing this educator stream for gosh, months now, and we've had some really amazing guests. We've had Shord here, and last week we had Marcos Romero here, talk about his work on Blueprint. But you teach many things, of course, but you've been teaching Unreal, professionally amongst other things, and you've been working with Unreal for a very long time. But you're at a university, a very reputable university, and um, you have a very unique, challenge and perspective because it is a very structured environment and very structured curriculum that you work with. And so one of the things that, Mark and Tom and I deal with, on a regular basis, because it's our job to work with universities and structured institutions and places like that, is many people ask us, and we develop curriculum quite a bit, but many people ask us, how do we find more structured curriculum? And we develop curriculum in that we build material, but it isn't structured in that this is what you do week one, this is what you do week two, this is what you do week three. We build it in that, here's 12 lessons, or here's, 15 lessons, or here's 22 lessons, and you figure out how you deploy that material. But it's in many ways the work that you do on a regular basis, which is to say, here's, a very specific way to deploy learning something, as big and as massive as Unreal, with very specific learning goals and objectives. And so I think it's really interesting to be here in an educator stream when we have lots of educators that come to this stream, to be able to talk to you. And then additionally, your proposal, your mega grant proposal, was to build a structured curriculum, in a defined period of time, 16 weeks in essence, and then to open source it, to make it available really to the whole education community so that they could benefit from it. And then, it was a huge undertaking, and we'll talk about it
Yeah.
throughout the stream today because you ended up making hundreds of videos and, dozens of terminology sheets and lots of paper and so forth. And then it's getting ready to launch. Tell us when tell us a little bit more about it and when it's getting ready to come out. And, and of course, later on, you're going to share and show us this content because it's really exciting.
Yeah, sure. It's gonna launch through edX, and it's broken into 3 6-week chunks. Um, and the first chunk will launch on the 25th. Have the different sections for that in my PowerPoint, but it's it's been quite an undertaking. And I anticipated, I pitched like, I don't know, maybe 110 videos or estimate, and then with the idea that um, my self management system usually works to a scope creep of about 30%. So yeah, I'm going to probably hit it a little bit more than that, but it's going to be about 100. I'm guessing maybe. I keep doing these bonus videos because I keep getting excited about these different things, and I can't put that in, or this week's too dense, and so. But yeah, it's a lot of different assets together.
160 videos in the course. So that's a lot of videos,
Yeah,
that's a lot of learning research. And, so what's the average length of a video?
they range from like 4 minutes to try to keep them around hitting 7 minutes.
So very consumable,
Yeah.
very easy to watch.
And it sounds like you can kind of choose what you need to learn, so you're not just tackling 160 topics.
Yeah, it's really manageable. I think there's the edX course is you can self moderate. You can take it in a couple different ways. You can pay a small fee and then part of a moderated area, and then get access to like quizzes or something. But then there's you just take it for free and then get videos, and there's also going to be posting them on my YouTube channel as well. It's supposed to be really open source. That's the idea behind platforms. So it's just a question of how you want to approach it. Right, the edX would sort of presumably provide more structure for you, and I think some people really appreciate that.
Right. Right. So, for those of you who don't have, deep insight or a lot of exposure to how this all worked, um, when Sean and I started talking about creating this curriculum and exposing it, Epic Games, I guess maybe a year and a half ago, we created this massive grant fund, and a significant portion of it is earmarked for education. And so, anyone can go to unrealengine.com and search for mega grants, or you can go to Google right now and search for Epic Games and mega grants, and you can go and apply for a mega grant. And if you have an educational focus, you can actually propose that you build any number of things that have an educational focus, around Unreal Engine, around Twinmotion, around Quixel. And what we really like on the educational side is that it has very specific outcomes that are based around Unreal Engine, Twinmotion, and Quixel content, but primarily that it's something that other people can benefit from in education that can learn from. So, when Sean said, I want to build this curriculum based on my experience as a teacher, based on my experience, understanding of learners, and focus on, really as much as I can teach about, the entirety of Unreal Engine, which is a lot, then it really made a lot of sense to, really engage with him on this material. Did you have something, Mark?
I just time out. We're having a lot of people with issues with Sean's audio. Can you just have a look there?
Oh, maybe
tried pinging.
Try talking more into the microphone.
Sorry for breaking the flow.
No, sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. So, Sean's
ahead.
got a microphone right in front of him. Some people are like, oh, pull down your mic, but he's got a microphone in front of him for those of you who
Yeah.
are not aware of that. And so, uh, it really, of course, behooved us. And so we have a number of people that are approaching us in a very similar way and saying, I've got this thing I really want to teach and I want to open source the curriculum. So edX, for those of you who are not familiar, and Sean will talk about this more, is a place where many people, many universities post curriculum like this. And you can open source your curriculum, which means that people can go there and get, can log in and take the courses or can and much more about it, so you'll talk about it much more in depth. But even before we get into that, one thing that we've been meeting a little bit this week as we were talking about the stream, and one of the things that was really interesting is to talk about learning in general. And Sean is a really interesting person who does a lot of research on his own, and we've been talking about now that we are in this world that we live in where a lot of people are sitting like we are at home, what does it mean to learn from home? What does it mean to be a remote worker, remote learner, remote instructor? And I think that this really factors into what is, what we're dealing with here, where people can go to, an open source site and learn something like Unreal Engine, which is a massive thing to learn from. And there's so many learning resources to now have a structured piece of, instruction like this can be really valuable, and then also people learn in many different ways, which was really fascinating to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. I really tried to I designed the course in sort of a meta learning uh, way, in that I guess the meta meaning that it's above. There's a lot of references. It's a heavily hyperlinked, that I'm going over material, and then I'm trying to constantly double check in my own mind. It's like, okay, well, if there's somebody who's new here, am I like sort of approaching asset learning perspective? Like, I have all this like pre knowledge. What would somebody who's coming in fresh or with like sort of certain skills, where would they want to be able to go in order to? And I mean, the great thing is that the Unreal Documents page and then the Unreal Learning area has all of this like amazing. It's just growing, right? So the ability to like constantly say, well, check the docs, and then there's this like live feed of that can even help reference you additional information, was a really great way to add or build onto the course. And then also making sure that, I think, constantly checking back to the vocabulary area, because so much of core content for every field is stored in the vocabulary, the terminologies of that field. That was really a helpful way of structuring it as well.
Right. And so when you're not teaching Unreal, what else do you teach at RIT?
I teach a mix. I had been teaching a course on next generation interfaces, where uh, it was a mix between microprocessors and sensors, and then uh, blending that. It sort of started to blend into AR and VR with
Hmm.
Vive, and so that was really sort of like the best. And then that sort of like mixed into XR, um, of like, well, how do you like get Unreal to talk to other things in your environment? So that was really wonderful, and it turned to some other grant work as well, some research. And then I had been also teaching a couple of the Unreal classes. There's characters class, and a there's also just various 3D like Maya classes.
Right. So you teach
So,
content creation and you teach
mhm.
connection to, devices like VR devices. And then you've been doing some virtual production stuff as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, we're excited about that. I've been prototyping, and I've got a bunch of colleagues now, and connected to another Epic Mega Grant, which I'm excited about. Got different experiments with using, I put up a video on my YouTube channel where just showing the iPad connected to basically using the Unreal, all the AR mixed with then piping it into Unreal, and it just handheld camera. It's amazing. We're we're working on a curriculum for that as well, because it's huge demand. especially given the nature of our situations being at home. I think being able to do
Yeah.
virtual production ramping up faster than I thought.
So one
I
of the
think it
cool
is-
things. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
So I think it is one of the hottest topics that we all hear when we're speaking to universities is virtual production.
And it's so new that there's basically no curriculum established yet. We've been challenged ourselves even to come up with basic training for it because it is so new. So
Yeah.
I look forward to your next curriculum that covers that because it's so wildly needed because it's such a huge change in what's going on in that field, and there's just no one in academia that could possibly keep up with it. So we all need to kind of pitch
Well,
and tell everyone here's how to do it because the industry needs that like crazy,
Yeah.
and there's just no one to fill it now. So we're in a super catch 22. So good on you. Really looking forward
Yeah,
to
what's really
a
cool
solid virtual production curriculum.
is that the last couple times that I came to visit Rochester Institute of Technology is for those of you who don't know, it's in, of course, Rochester, New York, and which is where Eastman Kodak is traditionally, and so what happens to be there is all these color scientists and these really, really smart people about color and photography and lenses and so I've had the privilege of going out to dinner with Sean and some of his colleagues and sitting around this table and hearing things that I'm just like, oh my, I had no idea that there was so much in-depth knowledge about, color, at the PhD level. Of course, I knew that existed, but to hear, your colleagues talk about, their incredible knowledge that you really have to know in many ways, to really speak intelligently about what is happening with LED screens and what's happening when you are translating that stuff to digital and when cameras are interpreting that stuff. So, the amount of expertise that is there at the Rochester Institute of Technology as you're building curriculum, it's not just, let's do cool stuff in Unreal Engine. It's about really understanding so that when you get on set and you're really solving problems, it's taking it to a new level, which is fascinating to me.
Oh yeah, we were on a call with I'm asking different alums that are at these big studios already doing virtual production. Some of them are so one of the calls I was just on recently, the people were like, well, how do you train somebody to be a MacGyver, right? Because essentially if like they were saying, well, you have to be super adaptive and super proactive and be able to work with the team and also be up on the latest tech. And so I think that's a real next generation education challenge. Is and it's not just for us to teach students, but I think given the way technology is accelerating, we've got to figure out as an institution how to implement that as well, right? I mean, there's technology will help as much as it can, but the structures, how does something stay flexible yet, structured at the same time?
One of the things definitely in industry at the moment is not just have people who can perform the task or do the job when they qualify, but people who are able to keep up with it because they're changing so quickly. So the skills to actually keep on learning skills are absolutely critical.
Yeah, so it's not even about specific tools. It's about demonstrating that you can take, a toolbox and make something from the set of tools that are available and invent new tools and adopt tools that other people have invented.
A lot of that as well.
And that, like you said, it's very hard because typically we're very structured and we teach a tool or a technique or whatever. And like Mark is saying, that there's this demand for that T-shaped skill set where you maybe know one thing, but you know how everything integrates. And that's not kind of how most curriculum and most education is kind of set up. And it's what's needed is those people that can fill that role and bind things together and make things happen that shouldn't happen.
What
We've
what
been
I'm seeing a lot
talking for
again
yeah.
is it needs to be highly collaborative as well, because there's so much to learn. Your people that you work with will pick up different parts of it, and together you can actually figure it all out. So online communities and in real life communities of learning constantly for life are really, really vital for all these new things.
So would
And
it
we
be
support them massively.
a fair assumption, Sean, to make that one of the reasons you wanted to bring the Unreal curriculum to a much earlier part, at RIT, freshman, sophomore, is so that when they got into their later academic uh, portion of their time, that they could then focus on some of that deeper problem solving, so that they didn't
Yes.
have to learn tools early on. For instance, they could already know the tools and get into more, interesting problems.
Absolutely, and that's actually why I got into making videos in the first place. Is that I, as much as I enjoy the tool pushing process, I love teaching design theory and critical thinking and creative thinking, and I found myself doing demos and hey, good, I can do a demo, and the students learn it. But then if they, some of them were like, I would find where the gaps were in my demos. They would ask questions, but it sucked time away from the engagement factor, challenging students on their thought process and creative process. So being able to like create a set of tutorials that um, students can do at their technical pace while then constantly challenging them, and like you said, being able to go deep in certain areas and then remain flexible at the junior and senior year to go deeper into emergent areas like AI and whatever's coming next,
Mhm.
which lot. It's exciting. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Are you ready to jump in and show us what you've created? We're excited to see it
Yeah,
more
sure.
deeply.
I'd
You
be
guys
happy
ready
to.
there in the channel to see some of the cool stuff that Sean's made and get excited about what you'll be able to access here? And, by the way, it comes out. The course will be fully live. When does it come out, Sean?
It's coming out in 3 sections. The first is on 8/25, and I've got the other dates. I think it's subsequent 6 weeks chunks. And then I think once they're live, they're just like running.
Sweet. Well,
Yeah.
people on the channel are ready to go. So
Oh, great. Okay, so I can share my. It looks like I'm screen sharing. Does that
you
look
are
great
screen
to you?
sharing.
All right,
If there's
great.
one thing we've learned is that the Unreal community is absolutely hungry for learning resources and teaching resources, and any resources that are put out there are just absolutely consumed
Oh,
because the quest for knowledge is strong with these ones.
The quest for knowledge is
yeah.
strong.
Need this, please.
The floor is yours.
See?
So yeah, here are the 3
But
dates for the launches, and the 8/25, 9/22, and 10/20. Be launching the different courses. Yeah, it's easily Googleable. I can pull up the website later on the edX website. It's edX. It's Unreal Foundations. So the first course, I'll show screenshots of each of the different. I'll talk about sort of my favorite parts of each chapter, I guess. Well, some of the challenges for developing the curriculum. But the first 2 weeks were essentially an overview and starting to work with inputs and outputs on the engine, as well as collisions, and then just sort of optimizing your process, really getting familiar and confident with using the Unreal Engine interface, then diving into lighting, materials, process physics, and of course have blueprints again. So just an overview of 3 object-oriented programming, and then jumping into object or programming and contrasting that, just to see like so much more that you can do once you understand how you can modularize things. And talking about the open, starting to get once you getting past the blueprints, I went a little bit more sort of comboed theoretical and as well as sort of the practical control tool. I think there's a lot of emergent technology going in that direction. It seems like it with Epic Games. Then chapter on skeletal meshes and animation tools, AI and US. Mainly, I stuck to AI. Then I'll talk about that. So I was stuffing curriculum, and I was like, oh no, I'm hitting more than 60 weeks. So I chucked AI and audio into a half-week chunk. It's a really big week. So
you need more
because there's so
time.
much. Yeah, you're right. There's been
Audio,
always the
more
need-
time for audio.
right? I know audio always gets shorted, even in like film production. Like 10% of the production time, and it's like it's worth 50% of the audience's appreciation. So,
Right.
Course 3 launch is October. So I have a chapter on teamwork, just because it's so
Oh, wow.
vital, and
Nice.
that's what I keep hearing, that there's all the students that I have that absorb all the tech really fast. Then they get really, really good at design. Then they go out into industry and they're like, you need to do more stuff. So we do at our program has a big team, multi-year team thing that we do. But just even in each of our classes, we try to incorporate works. But I'm trying to do it more consciously with Scrum process and
That's fantastic. That's something that we reiterate over and over to educators, on this stream and in person. That's one of the things that industry tells us, is that when people start in studios, they don't know these things. They've never submitted a Jira ticket, or dealt with, an actual pipeline system. They've always just imported an FBX and done whatever. They've never touched Shotgun. They've never seen a Python script,
right.
And they've never used Perforce. And so they have to learn this stuff on the job. And, it's industry standard now. It's become just, if you join a studio at this point, you'll be doing this stuff. So, it's rarely taught. So it's fantastic that it's here and in a form that other people can use. So
Absolutely.
sorry to interrupt. It's just one of those things that
I
I'm
love
like,
it.
every time I'm like, what should I teach my students in Unreal? Well, you should teach them studio development, because that's blueprints and studio development.
No,
Get
it's
'em
totally
to use
cool that you
Perforce.
mentioned
audio.
You mentioned
And audio.
oh yeah, right. You mentioned Jira, like, so I've done stuff with Gantt charts, and then I also done stuff with Trello. But then also, like, I was talking to colleagues in engineering, and they were like, well, you should use Jira. And then I was like, yeah, I really should, but it costs money. They're like, no. And then so RIT has like sort of, because I want to use burn down charts too, but then like, anyways, I'm working on it for my department. I had to do this whole same thing with getting the Esri GIS tool set for RIT. It's certain departments have certain tools, and so then you have to like figure out how to play well and make sure it fits budgets and stuff. So anyways, it's happening. I'm really excited. So I've done I did a first version class of cinematography and previs last spring, focused on integrating more cinematography elements to our program, because again, that's just the convergence of all these fields. And we taught elements and principles of design, but we were a little bit not as strong on like the motion graphics. So now we've got somebody who's teaching motion graphics in our curriculum, and also more cinematography, which is my background, which is great. So I love the sequencer, and then also sort of like having a father who is a photographer, all the stuff with lenses and stuff. Now I get to like sort of that, and it's a lot of fun to have the students start to be like, what, we have to learn about optics? What are you talking about? And that's really important. Really connected to the way light works and the way your image turns out. How about that? And same thing with UMG. It's amazing. I love interfaces. the next generation interfaces that are coming out. Not just the HUD stuff, which is amazing as well, because it's a challenge of information design of what's on the screen and what's flat, but then like the diegetic interfaces that are in the 3D environments. Some of the games that have started to implement that in creative ways, as well as, of course, like VR. So I have a little bit of the like stuff, and then of course, like the VFX area is super hot right now because everything's going to go with Chaos Engine and like the physics components, and so and Niagara right now is like production worthy. So that's it's great that I kept it on the sort of tail end of the pipeline for video production. And then yeah, this is sort of a in an intro class, the issue that I often run into is you sort of run out of time. I mean, ideally, with if you would do Scrum-based workflows, you would be going through this entire process over and over again in a cyclic fashion in terms of then like testing and optimization. But until you really learn the interface of Unreal and like process, it's the making sure your test package and performance profile, it comes a little bit on the end. I guess it depends on your students as well. So I have a bunch of images that I can roll through that are sort of connected to the chapters. The weekly framework, I guess, first of all, an overview of the weekly framework is usually, so I do an intro video. There's one of the things that I think that my students, before I was putting together this class, a lot of the time I would be doing stuff and I would mention in a lecture, I'm like, well, there's some content examples you should out. And then they're like, and then I'd get asked questions. No, just go into the content example. So I put a really quick content examples video for each chapter.
Yes.
Being just showing it off. So the students will like, yeah, right, exactly, right? So if they see it, I'm like, okay, at least they know. Now they like, because there's so much good, amazing stuff in the content examples that
tell everyone what content examples is in case they don't know.
Okay, so the content examples, it's a free downloadable pack, and it's just growing, and there's like these amazing chapters on every facet of Unreal, including, I mean, I'm gonna cite it again later, but like the math hall, so especially students that want to like go into VFX, but they're like but basically there's like there's a level, there are all these levels with the examples and breakdowns of like it's iterative hallways of what exactly the Unreal is capable of. Yeah, it's great. So then going over interface and a little bit of theory, different technical demonstrations, multiple technical demonstrations, and then a review and resources. Yeah, a lot of tech demos, which, sort of get it out of the way. This is how you do it. And not only that, but I mean, I used to work harder and not smarter. And so I'm trying to, I had wrist surgery on both my hands, and I'm like, okay, now use hotkeys. That's going to save your wrist so much. And so I'm trying to show how do you get to some of the results faster. And then mixed in with them, so depending on how you take the edX class, there's each section has a battery of questions that sort of randomly picks. I tried to, but basically I tried to do constantly multi-thread the curriculum into this multi-pass learning, meaning that you would encounter a topic, and then you would see a demo of it, and then you would also have access to a PDF of the slides, and then you would also be challenged to do project-based learning assignment, and then you would be reintroduced and reinforced later in the curriculum, and quite often from a different way. And that was maybe the most fun, in addition to sort of the information design of the course. I put together a bunch of visualizations as well through mind maps, which it's just another way I was enjoying. Like, well, how else can I visualize the information? And so I put together mind maps. I'll pull one up in just a second. First, a vocabulary terminology section, and then I had a really great team that's been working with me, students as well as like professional design that are at RIT that are sort of part of the Innovative Learning Institute, and they've sort of consulted with me. And some of my ideas I haven't been able to quite actualize, but I'm going to work on it for the future. Is trying to like would love to color code information as well for if this is like fast moving information, like you expect this to change soon, or this is like horror and you're like theory and you're like learning this deeply is just going to benefit you for the rest of your life, like sort of the stuff with the user interface theory of lighting. So yeah, but and they've done a great job of like taking the videos that and they put together a bunch of that will also be there's written form as well. 3 course projects. So yeah, the other thing is as much as I learned the Unreal Engine and it's really heavily connected to its roots and also the way I was teaching it for the last 10 years, where most of the students who are interested in teaching it were taking the class were interested in learning about it for interactive game design. But where I'm really excited is in this multi-field convergence. So to make it as broad as possible, because there's all of these I keep having students who go out and then like they end up like some of them are working at robotics companies and also sort of traveling internationally. And there's all these like architectural visual, like one of my colleagues is an architectural visualization person, and now we're doing, it's comboing with film and TV. So I think there's and also the industrial design stuff. So that's really exciting to me. So that's kind of how I designed the course as well. So before I go to the chapter highlights, maybe I can show one of the mind maps. I wonder if I can pop out and are you able to see the mind map? Is that still sharing?
Yep.
Or do I need to? Oh,
Nope, it's
okay,
still good.
cool. So yeah, this will be. This is going to be shared, but I mean, anytime there's a little arrows, there's a hyperlink which will take different to channels. But and then I go over I did a video where I demonstrate thinking about like why Unreal there's trends and how does it connect to different fields as well. And then there's hyperlinks that you just sort of like dip into all of these platforms, like the output platforms and where you're going.
That's amazing.
So yeah, at first I thought, oh, this isn't gonna be that long, and then it got deeper and deeper, and I was like, wow, it is like I was amazed too because
Wow.
yeah, and then hyperlinking everything just right. It just there's so many amazing connections, which I mean, obviously that's why
Yeah, that's great.
doing what it is, right? By inputs and outputs, by application, right?
Our marketing
Some of
team
it-
wants this. They're like, why Unreal?
I can think of a couple teams that want this. I mean, and it speaks to just how broad and how many things Unreal can take in and output and everything. That, like you said, you just keep going and going. And we're challenged to kind of get a scope of everything and what everyone's doing with it, and so that's I think I'll be using this myself.
Awesome, yeah, you got it. I mean, I love the cross connections too. Like the fields are going, they're branching out like a tree, but then they also like sort of dovetail in, right? The convergent and divergent technology stuff, all this HCI stuff, like really excited about that, where connections to haptics, biofeedbacks, like the eye tracking stuff that's and
Yeah,
Unreal is such a
what's interesting is that Epic, in the last couple of years has grown tremendously. And in many ways, it's because we've needed a lot of product specialists, people who were, experts in these fields to come and join us so that we can address, the demand from these industries. And so that we could have people internally to communicate with these companies that could work with our engineering teams, as all the things that you just showed, so that there wasn't just a blank. When somebody tried to reach out to Epic and say, we're interested in working with you in this capacity, whether it's, HCI, whether it's, haptics, whether it's, anything that you can imagine. And so a lot of our growth in many ways is fueled by the fact that um, because of the way that, straight from Tim Sweeney all the way down, Epic chooses to do business and, opens and access to the engine and has, access to the source code and makes it very easy for third-party people to work with Unreal. Everyone wants to work with it, and and it's very specifically in education. The fact that you're exposing your students and they have these amazing ideas, and then they go off and work in these companies, and they bring Unreal to these companies, and then they go off, with that knowledge, and which is one of the reasons why it was so easy from a grant perspective to go, yes, let's bring Unreal much earlier into the educational process, and make sure that people don't have to wait till they're juniors and seniors in college, and which is why, we have initiatives to make sure that even secondary education students are learning, and even your curriculum makes it available to secondary education students.
absolutely. Yeah, and then there's an understandable gap as well in terms of, yeah, I think depending on what the curriculum is for different educational institutions, but like I think the process from 10 to 20 years ago was heavily on like, well, how do you model something and you texture it? But like, I mean, now that Epic's got Pixel connected to it, and like, how do you model something? It's quite often like, how do you modify a model? Or
Hmm.
and so you might be able to accelerate a lot faster and structure stuff together. I mean, no doubt there's like specialists. So in terms of the curriculum was kind of heavy. I mean, heavy obviously with by intent on the technical skills, the different subtopics
So
that it's
here's your
covering.
taxonomy. Here's your skills
Yep.
taxonomy that you've already broken out.
Exactly. Yeah. And all broken out into the links, as well as links to the core areas of the Unreal documentation. I find that useful. I mean, it's all well
Mhm.
laid out. It's all well laid out on your on the documentation site, but sometimes it gets really deep, and I want to be able to jump to the header fast. So if I have this open, I can my own like jump to the headers versus hitting Google. That's a little, so hopefully there's some use for this as well.
Yep.
Project management, fine stuff. Uh, so many. Yeah, you guys were talking about earlier, like, so I haven't been in production, but it was so amazing. Like all these, I mean, right? I've seen this more and more. Right, the tools built on top of Unreal now.
Hmm.
Mhm.
This current, like, we're also using Cinetracer a little bit,
Oh,
even though it's
cool.
in beta, but just um, but yeah. So I mean, this is one thing too. The how do you ask a good question? Not a lot
Mm.
in the curriculum on that, but maybe toward, I mean, in the last chapter, a discussion of critical and strategic thinking for, you know, are you going to try a post in the forum? Are you posting too early? One of my students did, because I went over this really harshly, and they built a hierarchy of like, when do you ask Sean a question? Because he's just gonna like yell at you to like ask a good Google it well, and a lot of my faculty would do that as well. They're like, is that Googleable, right? And then okay, so is it Google? And then like maybe what if it's forum-based question? Forums does that.
I mean, that's really important. And we, surprisingly enough, Mark, Tom, and I spent a fair amount of time teaching this as well, because there, 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, getting information about Unreal Engine may have been a challenge, but now there's so much information that you can go and Google anything, and probably the biggest challenge now is choosing which piece of information you want to settle on. Right? Is it this YouTube video? Is it this um, Answer Hub post, or this this website, or this Udemy video, or this whatever? And so I think the ones that can be frustrating is when we get an email or something when it's clear that somebody just ran to send us an email and ask us a question before they maybe Googled something or went to YouTube, because it can take longer to send us an email than to just search Google or
You don't want to
YouTube.
give them the link to let me Google that for you.
Yeah.
That's not professional, Mark.
No.
And it's clear, right? It can be very frustrating to go to YouTube and find, 36 videos about, when you have to figure out which one's the one's going to answer your question. But the reality is that if you go and watch the first 3 or 4, you will very quickly be able to eliminate and get to at least understand that, you can get to a solution. And here's the thing, and I think this is, and I'm kind of curious to hear what you think about it. And we say this when we teach, solving problems in Unreal Engine is like baking a cake, right? There's not a lot of wrong ways to bake a cake. At the end of the day, if you're using, batter and sugar and, frosting, it's going to be okay, right? Unless you're using mud and hair and, and pepper, then it probably is not going to turn out like a cake, but in general, you don't mess up a cake if you're using the right stuff, right? And so it's going to be okay. And so I think I go on YouTube all the time, and I work at Epic, and most of the stuff I see is not terrible. And of course, there's definitely good best practices, but those are now fairly well known. And go and look, and then if you try it and your project goes from 60 frames a second to 12 frames a second, that was a bad. Now you're using hair and mud on your cake, and you should step back a little bit. But
Right.
I think one of the things these days is there's an awful lot of information, and it can overwhelm somewhat. I think there are times when it's great to be part of a community that will actually, first thing is see if you can find out yourself. Next thing is actually ask somebody in a community you're part of, and do some searching as well. But it is curating the amount of knowledge these days is becoming tricky. But again, communities do that. There's a lot of groups that actually do that for you. So if you're part of those, they'll be saying, these are the things you should be looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually, I mean, right. So in addition to starting my YouTube channel so I would be able to offload some of the technical workflows for my students, but it was also doing what you just said. It was finding those gaps and then finding like, oh, well, hey, somebody has this question. Then I'd Google it and I was, oh, wow, nobody really answered that before. That's like a really great opportunity to stretch my knowledge. So serving somebody else really serves yourself in the long run, because I'm getting deeper knowledge and also being like, okay, I was there first, right?
And you can jump into the documents.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. That half of that was sometimes just reading the document. Of course, nobody loves to read, but I mean, especially if you're like very visual, then I don't talk too much about this nature of technology too much, but it is one of my like loves in terms of how it's working and how it's flowing. But I do mention in one of my videos where I was like, well, here's a workflow right now, but in months I already know, like I've seen posts on forums for people who are doing that there's going to be a shift in the physics engine to it's going to go to the chaos engine. And so you got to keep track of how Unreal technology is flowing, but also hardware, like keeping your eye on like, okay, so in 19 days, right, NVIDIA is going to release the next gen like graphics cards, presumably, right? And so then sort of the next generation of like sort of version 2 of real-time ray tracing is going to be that much faster. And how is that going to be exciting? I mean, like, sort of like you look at also what the pro I look at the sort of the cycle of like, well, what are the pros doing? People who are special down effects. So in X number of years, one student is going to be able to do some of the stuff that pros are going to be doing because the tools will help them. So then where do I shift to design principles, deeper technology, a lot of resources. Some of these are just like course based with the resources doc where I broke things down as terminology, lots and lots. I'm gonna have to readjust this one. The instructional staff I'm working with, some amazing work, a lot of work there, and yeah, I mean, a lot of this is just all like what's on your website as well, right? There's all these different hubs. Thanks. Let
That
me
is
flip
very
back to
cool.
my so chapter highlights. So chapter 1 is just interface. I can go through chapter 1 fast, but I really want to like sort of shout out to the creators field guide, and also there was a video that was done like several months ago. It was like, what is interactive 3D? And I think those
Mhm.
are really, really great sources to look at, from a how might you approach the way knowledge is structured, as well as this like sort of the field guide goes into this know, understand, apply. But from an intro class, a lot of it is I've said a few times in my chapters, like, okay, well, just make sure you're aware of this, go down that road, then start beginning and apply. Uh, and then what is interactive 3D? Oh, yes. And just the first chapter goes over essentially, I sort of love, I mean, for years when I've taught the Unreal Engine, I love teaching it in the like seeing the students be able to create something so fast, right? There's a bunch of videos too on your channel, like what can you do in like an hour, and you get up to speed, and like people are just so empowered. They're like, whoa, I can do all this, and especially if they're coming from different packages where they're rendering stuff, or like right. And so sort of creating that empowerment wow moment where you really get feeling of you're using tools, you don't really deeply understand them, but with without a huge amount of work, you're creating something amazing and interactive and the whole 3D environment. So that's connected to the first project. And then the second one is taking Unreal and starting to branch out into, well, okay, well, how do you accelerate your usage of the interface so that I mean, I really love the concept of Fitts law, where you're moving your mouse all over the screen and you're trying to hit small buttons versus taking a little bit of time and memorizing some keys, and you're just going to accelerate. uh, and also just making sure that building confidence in that Unreal Engine, like a core part of the Unreal Engine is that it's strongly it inputs and outputs so well to some of the other platforms. So I'm using FBX as the core snapping strategies, speeding up interface, vision. And then in chapter 3, going over lighting, I enjoy showing off some of the IES lights, design elements, as well as sort of fake light and move lights and dynamic. So for a while, it was such a time lighting, and then I and I started doing VR, and then I was like, oh, okay, now I really need to learn like baking. How do I make this look well, and how do you make it look great? Because baked lighting can be so beautiful, and
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, yeah, it's a pitfall. That's one of those like really common pitfalls for people starting out with Unreal is we have so many kind of lighting options, distance fields, dynamic, all of these things. It's hard to kind of choose which one. And I often very much encourage people to start with dynamic, just because it's less things to deal with. You get lower performance and lower quality. I think when you're learning, it's okay to have a bad frame rate, maybe not get the perfect GI bounces on things, but to be able to, and there's no time wasted. You don't have to click and wait and do that process. So, which can take people who are just starting out learning kind of out of that process. So yeah, I think it's really good to start dynamic and then add in these additional technologies that we have. Even though it can be so tempting because you go on the marketplace and you download, the subway scene, you're just like,
Right.
oh, it looks so good. And that's, because the Decagon guys are amazing
Yeah,
and they've
they
been
are.
doing it for years and they've figured out all the pain points. But, um, and that's a challenge in general with a lot of learning content in Unreal is that it is often so spectacular that if finding content like this that's very straightforward and is stripped of all this extraneous information and complexities really helps people learning, especially like you're talking about people who are not already in Engineville, like
Mhm.
people who haven't played games, this is very just a brand new tool. And that's not something that even we're typically kind of, we don't assume that people are, starting out as like, I'm learning computer art with Unreal Engine. That's tough stuff.
I remember a
Yeah.
couple of years ago, I was talking to the documentation team about the section in documentation that addresses shadows in Unreal, and trying to explain, trying to explain anyone how shadows work in Unreal Engine is nothing you do in 5 minutes, and
Right.
so even trying to collate, the shadow section of documentation in one area is really complicated because it kind of encompasses a lot of different systems and so, lighting is one thing, but even shadows alone is another really huge layer of complexity. And it's because there's a lot of systems that come into play that generate shadows. But if you go fully dynamic, it simplifies the whole process of generating shadows instantly. So it's very interesting that this part of the discussion comes into play because yeah, there's lots of bits and pieces. There's lots of different uh,
Mhm.
components to rendering in Unreal, but there's lots of good learning about it too.
Yeah, I really love how I've been watching the evolution of the documentation over the years, and like I've sort of flowed with, you pick your challenges because you do, and you have a limited amount of time, and like there are certain, and then there was like a year, I think it was like, oh, like there was a video that like he like, I was like,
Hmm.
oh man, that was like good, like yeah. Anyways, I mean, there, and then on top of like there are all these like sort of Q&A questions that are like top FAQs that were really great that
Hmm.
sort of evolved. So yeah, I put together sort of the chart that sort of broke down some information design of like, okay, well this is baked and this is the advantage, this is the advantage, and case scenarios off of some I've watched you guys, well as the diagnostic view mode tool. That was a really great excuse to in those. I also love the geolocation based lighting. That's connect. I think it's more heavily used. Well, I mean, of course, it's used in like so many fields now, right? And but the fact that you can like get actual latitudes and longitudes, Google Maps,
Mhm.
and also right, like just in those recent videos, right? You can And also with like the amazing volumetric stuff, it's just you can totally do some of all this like physics stuff. It works, right? And
Yeah.
it's amazing.
And that's, that's one of our goals long term always is, and we stated it with UE5 in our presentations at Unreal Fest, is that's what we want to do. Everything just works. And the key to that is making it physically based, because that's how we understand things, the world around us. So if we can make it work like the world around us, then it seems natural and it's easy for us, so it's twofold. It's like PBR. It made everything look better overnight. Everything suddenly looks like a real surface. But the real secret sauce there is it's easier to author than the old way.
Yeah, right.
Like, I can author a PBR surface and know this is going to look good always. I'm done. The old way was just never.
Maybe.
It never.
Yeah, maybe.
So as soon as you change lighting, it looked even less right. And
the one thing
this goes to like the sunlight and the atmosphere. That's just, to be able to drop a couple of things in and get realistic lighting. That's awesome. I used to spend days on a realistic day scene.
Yep.
Yeah.
One thing to remember with this is, because it's realistic, because it's based on real world physics in a lot of cases, is make sure your units are right. That's one of the things that I hear quite a lot from students. Can I change my units because I want to do this and this? Well, you can, but you're going to have to do an awful lot of other adjustments, and some units are squared and some units are cubed, and it becomes tricky.
Yeah.
You can.
But
we don't. Let's just say at Epic Games, one UU equals 1 centimeter.
Yeah.
In everything we've ever done.
Ground truth.
No, I totally get, like, I've had students, I mean, and there's different engines that have tried to fix that, right? I mean, where the physics, like I have a student who's done some physics simulation usually, and then it's acting really weird. I'm like, well, did you scale it up really well? Like, did you scale it huge? And is that why it's, and usually it's has something to do with, transforms and no, I'm so glad, like, it was a perfect segue talking about materials, because one of my, that's the love of like, sort of the combination of effects and how that connects to materials, all stuff like the PBR materials. Once it was there, and then like once I not only understood the PBR materials, but once I understood like how you could create material instances, and then all of a sudden it was just recomputed. So like I show my students a lot of the time, they're coming from somewhere else, and then I'm like, they're like, no, it's really fast, and I'm like, but we haven't done material instances. I'm like, and then they're like, what? And then it's like, it's completely off the chart fast, because you can iterate off of setting up your materials and then get instant, like it goes from getting rendered for like 2 minutes, get a frame feedback, to like 3 seconds, and then to instant. Amazing. And so I also love some of the non-UV based workflows. So I did a Vertex Painting 101, and then put some bonus videos into something on my YouTube channel that you can do like vertex painting with height maps, and I love being able to like paint through cracks on objects. Also have a little bit of parallax materials on offset, and
nice
having things animated, and then so like texture projection stuff and decals.
Cool.
Then the render, I had this render target material, being able to use cameras and just type information. And then I didn't go into it in this course, but I did another course previously where, like once you have those 2D render targets, you can like bake those out as well, which is amazing. Submarine resources with different.
Sounds quite thorough. I mean, the course seems really in depth and quite thorough.
Thanks. I think so. I do question myself in some of these chapters where I've done courses before, the amount of information per minute. It certainly is the add water. So I think whoever's, depending on student, they say you can do it in 5 or 6 weeks, but you might be going through and then doing multi-pass learning. Because I prefer, that's my style of information delivery, is
Mhm.
deliver a rich cake and then
As long as you don't put hair and mud.
to springboard off of the metaphor of the cake
Or
metaphor.
lactose intolerant.
I really like
So,
that.
almond milk, right?
Ooh, I don't like where this is going. I like that term, multi-pass learning.
Yeah.
I think it's really appropriate for how to learn these really big systems, because you can't eat the whole cake at once.
Right.
You're going to have to take it slice by slice and have a glass of milk in between those two and come back tomorrow. You can't even do it all in one day, not even in one sitting.
Sounds like
Yeah,
you've eaten
This
cake
is going
before.
to take a minute.
Right. Yeah, you almost have to put blinders on for some of the information and
Right.
and just
Get that
permit yourself.
slice and put the cake away.
Right. And then I that's some students get really into certain subjects. And then I go, well, did you see this part? And then they go, what? Oh my God, that's there too. And I'm like, yeah, that's because you're learning these facets, and then like now your brain is able to like absorb and get excited again about it. It's the same. That's how I feel about Quixel right now. I'm excited to dive into that because it just provides yet another level of connectivity there. So in chapter 5, did the EPV stuff, post-process volumes, with going over the core areas, lens, color, film, and rendering features, but just showing how they like post-process volumes. That's one of my favorite chapters in terms of how it connects to the other chapters, and sort of in this level, it has the ability to have talk in Flincer chapter, be like, hey, remember this area we post-process volumes, and there's post-production, but also then adding warping. So I have a part where there's a swimming pool and you dive into the water and then water gets warpy, and so that's fun. But then combo that with the physics area, and then the user interface chapter with building a just right, because and then moving into the physics chapter, just some of the basics of how you can change mass on objects, how you can apply constraints, add motors, move, and how it connects to VFX. Just
Cool.
making
Mhm.
puns when possible, about like this week's trajectory. So
Oh.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
let me ask you a question. So a lot of if there's a lot of material out there. You go to some of the Udemy courses or YouTube courses are very project based, as in we're going to make this thing, and you're going to build these systems, and at the end, but this seems like there's many micro projects, and so you're covering a lot of material. You're covering a whole lot of material and a huge breadth of the engine, but it's not like I think one of the issues I've had is that if you're learning to cook and you're like, oh, you're gonna learn to make a lasagna, and at the end of making a lasagna, bingo bongo, you've learned how to cook. Well, that's not really it, because you've just learned to make a lasagna, right? And so
Right.
I think that can be challenging with project-based learning, because unless you string together a whole lot of different projects, you don't take on a lot of different ideas that you can then utilize to solve problems in other ways. And so you're covering a tremendous amount of material, and you're using a lot of micro projects that then you can string together to solve problems in other ways. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I think each method has an advantage and a disadvantage, but certainly with like a straight line trajectory based learning project where you're going over steps, you certainly can memorize those steps. And then the advantage and disadvantage of the assignments that I often give in my higher end classes, they're I sometimes they're sort of on the edge of graduate level where they're open ended, and I get students that are a little bit concerned because they don't have as specific goals, and that it challenges the student to ask like and start to create their own constraints with the project, as well as like then I'll assign a tutorial and then I'll ask them to make some serious modifies because it's one thing to think you know something. There's this concept of the illusion of explanatory depth, where you think you know something well, and then when somebody asks you to explain it or to demonstrate it, might be or to modify it, right? Might be challenged in a way that um, you're not as adaptable as
Mm-hmm.
possible, which is I think so. Yeah, I guess that was my take: is micro projects with a lot of open-ended
Mm-hmm.
structure
Right.
to it.
Right.
Yeah, so cool. My students did a good job on the. So you encounter a fluid volume there, so you can go into the pool, but then there's also the ability to launch the character off this. Uh, some that are very concrete, and as well as abstract.
Your
And then
lighting needs to
showing
be rebuilt, by the way.
that now.
Your lighting needs to be rebuilt.
Yep, it did indeed. That's great. Yeah, and then here's like a sort of a bonus tutorial, like how does it connect? The morph driven, so like how do you connect? This is the morph driven spring physics. If it's more of an intermediate level tutorial, but basically it has a physics constraint that will modify the morphs of the spring scaling. And how people go. I'll see. I got a lot of questions on my YouTube channel I posted. They're like, make my character jump up at once. You can add that too. So yeah, knowing where the constraints are, as well as the tools that automatically do. So I did a core overview of in chapter 7 of Blueprints, and I tried to add in, I guess the sort of value add was I'd never taught, we have a scripting class in our curriculum, and one of my colleagues is working to transform a lot of the Python based stuff that we teach into some Blueprints class as well. But so I get a lot of students fresh, and they've had a scripting class, but they're not always translating. So try to add some of the like in Unreal, what's local, relative versus world space, some of the stuff that they might encounter in the Blueprint system, but they might not have thought about it so much. They started to add interactivity. That's where I sort of, besides the core basics and like asking yourself how to debug, and then where hopefully they got, depending on like what the skill set is, some to be able to just add classes and be able to like rapidly go through chapters fast. Then like some of my favorite moments was in like chapter 8 was connecting it to the parameters in materials and being, hey, now you can control not just controlling control material instances, but also like child blueprints, and then demonstrating a modular system. So how object-oriented coding can be so extensible, as well as
Awesome.
like sort of a time to power up,
Yeah, that's
as
awesome.
well as like changing, just being able to push a button in Unreal and like saying, hey, like I just clicked and now the key changes, not only changes color, but then it connects to like multiple doors. So I think that's really like, once you get that as a concept, then you can turn that into game mechanics, or you can that as a function for I mean, I created a thing too where you like sort of go into an area, there's a timer, and like in the pool, and you're not burned or something. I think also line traces are so powerful and real in that they're used for diagnostic purposes. It relates to rendering as well as like generation traces where the character can place the foot, and so like talking about that and then just going over the basics, demonstrate material instance and child loop. Yeah. In the environments chapter, really went from I did a series of well, this is how you build out like the standard flow for how do you like sort of sculpt and get an environment built, and then also started going into like explaining a little bit of like how do you set up them for components. But then going beyond that, I think where I got really excited was the emergent workflows for the next generation, the anticipated next generation tools that are going to Unreal 5 for large environments, and how like talking about level. Like I linked to a bonus video for level streaming, and also like sort of the plugins, the Unreal like lidar plugin that's there, and I mean there's the and I did a demo as well with. So I mean I mentioned that you can download sort of city engine, so I like sort of grabbed a city out of there and you can try a demo of that. And then I created a floodwater like a flood, just a sort of a demonstration of the floodwater, as well as talking about like Unreal has a whole simulated. I mean, it's still in the experimental phase, but I see in the near future the ability to create ecosystems where grow trees. And I mean that when I remember hearing that several years ago, it sort of blew my mind. I was like, it's amazing. That's going to be like a future thing, as well as like of course water system. Mentioned flow maps, go into that of course, but I think also like tools that built on top of this, where like Brushify is tool for like mixing the painting process plus foliage process. I mean, you can do it yourself, right? You can make it scratch or but you can next gen tools that allow you to rapidly get yourself on the road to the metaverse, right? So um yeah, I was excited about that. I mean, I think things like talking about different types of tropism as well, right? So like concepting where well trees, certain foliage bends towards light, will react towards phototropism and chemotropism. The theory connects environment design as well, which heavily connects to like the way anthropology as well, so like how cities evolve, right? You're in a grid-based city, or how does the topology of the land affect the way buildings? Anyways, that's an exciting uh, interest of mine. This comes in the chapter on skeletal system, but it also sort of shows up in sort of takes showing how you can blend between different some of the tools that allow you to blend between the physics. Okay, so you could turn this into a physics simulation where it rigid body like ragdoll sim, and as well as sort of blending between did a had a one of my students, they built a whole he did such a great job. My student Noah, he did this like animated uh, morph. Well, it's a s'more, right? That's chasing a marshmallow, and so then like I use that as sort of like as a springboard for the s'more using sockets, so we can do socket snapping for the top of the s'more. So it can be a heavenly s'more, or it can be like turn into a little devil, and then there's also a morph mellow that's part of the morph into a different up and squash and other things. And then also really excited about the new control rig stuff. So talked more in theory because there's a couple of, like, just in the last month, there were like 2 really great presentations that went over all this. So some of my colleagues jumped on all of those, and they're like, "Oh my God, you can rig in Unreal now, and you can, like, the demo that was part of Unreal Fest with the Scorpion and tying that to the dynamics as well. It's great. This was one of my most difficult chapters for classes that sort of give an onboard ramp for students. Then I have 16 weeks for demonstrating, like, hey, here's how you can, like, do a bipedal character flow, and you can hard assets, and then you get adjusted to some of the blueprinting systems. So my own too much knowledge getting in my way of, well, how do I do this in like a way? It was tough. The inverse of that for me, prepping for the AI. I had done some real simple stuff, but it gave me. This is one of those times where I'd found there's quite a few videos on the web. There's like, okay, if you want to just do the simple perception based AI, that's great, but then. And if you go deeper, it's really easy to add like sound-based perception in the AI. But I hadn't seen a lot where I keep it really simple and add sound. So I happy with adding that to the whole tutorial series, and then going over the AI Blackboard logic basics. Characters run around based on stimuli in the environment, mainly just viewing you or hearing. One of my students I'll upload. I had a lot of these bonuses, but she did a cool EQS car example. I think that I was trying to tell my students, like, well, all right, so as much as possible, like, there's game-oriented workflows, but how would you use it in like these emerging other areas? Happy. So here's the half week on audio that I'm totally geeking out about. I love all the audio, especially the dynamic focus and the new convolution framework, where
Yes.
it's so amazing, right?
Amazing.
It calculates your like
Yes.
environments and So I mean, just even like I remember when I was starting to do VR and
Mm-hmm.
like doing spatialized and attenuated audio that gets your head and like comes out correctly. I mean, Unreal's had that for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
but then in VR it brought it to another level for me. On grant work and like the dynamic focus, right? So being able to like have the audio change by having objects drop in front of you and get a little muffled, or so really enjoyed that.
Now,
Yeah, Lewis and I were geeking out about
yeah.
convolution reverb this morning and talking about how it's amazing. It's another one of those physically accurate things where it's so easy to kind of author. Once you go out there and clap in a couple of rooms, or throw a golf ball down a stairwell or whatever, and then your audio just sounds so rich. And it's because it's physically based and physically accurate that, again, like the workload seems reduced and the level of quality goes up so high that it's these sorts of technologies don't come along so often that your quality goes up and your workload goes down. So you got to learn them. Don't do the old way. Don't do old reverb anymore. Don't do specular. Do PBR. Like, just turn the switch.
Great.
Is this still course 1, or we've already crossed into?
Yeah, we're into course 2.
Okay.
Yeah, I can fly through course 1 ends at the physics, the end of the physics chapter. So
gotcha.
It's 1 to 6, and then 6 through 11.
Gotcha.
Or 7. Yeah, so the third course would start at chapter 12 with pipeline. So I'm really excited about the demonstrations I've seen with virtual collaboration, especially given our situation. And so we're going to be trying that out fall, being able to just use the tools are just right there, right? Being able to like go in and work collaboratively in the engine together. That's also the so that some of the new versioning tools also. Yeah, I mean, I had the different, some of the free ones, right? Like the, Gantt project is that going over the elements of project planning, project dependencies, and tracking. Just depends on how, what kind of person you are. Like, I have some, and I think I was guilty of being one of those until I ended up in industry for 5 years, and then I ended up leading a team and being like, oh, we got to get better at estimating. And I'm pointing the finger at myself as well,
Mhm.
right? Sure that you're able to, like, even if you're adding buffers, making sure you also, understanding, getting better at delegating and tracking, understanding, like, okay, there's a milestone, like, this is where you're going to have a minor crunch because we have to have this because project dependencies that are going to flow afterwards. And I mean, I think with a lot of the way Unreal's working, that there's a lot of, like, more and more ability to multi-thread, and just making sure that that just puts the burden more on, like, the teamwork, because you want to make sure that you also have, like, checkout system. I put links into I like that the Unreal roadmap has been on Trello for a long time, so that's
Hmm.
cool. uh, Both from project standpoint, but also to down so that they're not spending time on tools. I had a student who was going deep on error-based workflows a year ago, and I was like, well, your Ion, like, some people are building tools.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, you want to know the design, but you also want to make sure that you're not learning something that's going to go from 10 steps to one. Yeah, the sequencer, so great. I also, the ability to go over lens and parameter tracks, having a little bonus in there, like the variant manager is so great,
Variant
especially for
manager.
the students that I've got that are connected to the industrial design. Variant manager very useful for product vision. I mean, not to mention, I think also, like, previs. Well, I mean, being able to, like, say, hey, there's, like, you're working with an art director.
Oh, totally. It's one of those things. There's a bunch of those things in Unreal that are there that, like, in my previous life, in Unreal 4, I should say, that are in there like that, that I've built a million times before, and, like, configurator sort of stuff. I've built those systems
Yeah,
over and over again, and they've always been kind of kludgy and whatever because they've always been, purposely built for one thing. The variant manager is one of those things that I was kind of like, it's not actually going to work. And then I tried it out and was like, oh, this actually works. Will it do this though? It does. Okay, what if I make it and then I attach it to blueprints? Okay, it does. All right, this is really way cooler than I expected it to be. I don't ever have to build one of these systems again. And so, I mean, that's just, it's nice having that, like, reliable thing
yeah,
to just lean on. But if you don't know that it's there, you're just going to assume that you have to make it.
Hmm.
So even like you said, this multi-pass learning, first you have to see all of these things that are there, and then you can know where to go for the next pass when you have to learn that next thing. I'm totally smitten with the multi-pass learning.
yeah.
That's my new catchphrase for the next 2 weeks.
All right, awesome.
Everybody, prepare yourselves. I'm using it.
Got to reinforce that knowledge. Yeah, I'm guilty of not doing that sometimes, but I like to set a timer or something where you got to, like, go back. There's some research that says that, like, it's your brain optimally works on digesting information based on, like, a logarithmic system, so, like, a day a week. So I mean, there's all this, like, sort of connection to your state and state as well, state-based learning. Yeah, so I'm really excited. The UMG chapter is really in process right now, but making sure that, like, just going over the cross blueprint communication, enforce the object oriented coding, and doing, once again, animating. It's a slightly different workflow, but, like, doing animated materials inside of
Mm.
UMP well,
Mm.
and using the 3D widget is such a great tool. Like when I saw that starting to emerge, I was like, oh, that's and like I mean I'm sure it can be for so many applications. We used it for a project, for a research project investigating where could we visualize archival objects in ways that are at this Perry archive at RIT, able to like interact with them in certain ways and in VR that you couldn't in worlds, so like age or de-age objects, and then also the other thing, click on and transport yourself to a location where that historical object would place. I thought that was like a cool, and it was using the 3D widgets all over the place. So just be able to spawn them based on, and then also make sure you're auto rotating towards the player. Yeah, and then just a simple top-down map that sort of goes back to the render target 2D workflow that was like sort of demonstrated in earlier chapters. And then, yeah, I'm really excited about the Niagara and gas engine.
There's a lot to get into there.
Yeah, you were mentioning that earlier. I was a little scared, but I'm like, okay, so because I mean, that was like part of my background before I became an academic. It was like sort of VFX-y, doing simulation. Like you were mentioning that too, and I was like, you're like, oh, you're learning all this new stuff, and I'm like, oh, okay. Looks like there's a big chunk ahead.
Yeah, I think there's part of this next generation will definitely, the VFX are going to move much more close to what you've seen in Hollywood simulation, stuff like that, and fewer of the just cards of smoke sort of things happening. So really a really big evolution in the skill set too of building those effects.
Yeah, I really loved for years how the ability to like. I mean, it was. But I think some of you already said this before, where like a lot of or sort of the Gibson quote, right? The future here is just unevenly distributed, right? But like the idea that like so many of these tools that are going to be in one of your podcasts recently or live streams, it was like, Unreal 5 is. It was yours, I think, Tom. You're talking about this. Like we were talking about, like, okay, well, how are you going to adapt to Unreal 5? And it was like, well, yeah, like so the LiDAR tools are there, and like it's just going to start to be more there, right? And so I mean, some of the stuff like with there's like plugins that NVIDIA where you could like do your own custom fracture and like multi-layer collision stuff. It's been out there, but you sort of had to like dig, right? But it's just going to be much more accessible using new. I like also combining that. I love how you can combine physics with, as well as now, of course, like the combo of particles and. But yeah, I just wanted to call out the math hall as well, because it's some of those, like, learning math is, as much as I think a lot of people shun the concept. Some people don't like it, but that's a skill that's probably not on you,
No.
right? Like at least
No.
learning a little bit about vectors and like how things like work, right? So it's like, not going to hurt you to spend.
No.
Well put.
Okay.
Math probably won't be outdated with Math 2.0.
I was stunned one time when I was actually teaching in a university, and I was trying to just do a very simple expression, and I was explaining, that when a round object rolls, it's related to its diameter and pi, and people looked at me and said, "What's a diameter?" I kid you not. And,
Run away.
Yeah, but everything is maths. All art is maths too, when you break it down in some way or other.
Yeah, you gotta tell them, like, well, there was this Greek goddess, and she was in charge of the seasons.
Yeah,
Send them to Wikipedia.
and don't mention radius.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
We're not talking about pie. We're talking about cake.
3.14,
Nice.
3.14, 159265358979.
Oh my God.
3.
Wow. That's amazing.
I don't have a life.
Show off.
Yeah.
Well, you know
So-
what? You
Yes?
need to rush because there's going to be some questions here. I'm pretty
Oh,
sure.
okay, right on. Well, let's wrap this up. I mean, I think we're on chapter 16, and getting these core insights and version lock, and they're talking about. I ran into it. I've run into it before, so it's going to be sort of a light making your executable, because it's just a wonderful. It's a wonderful feeling when you hear that beep and you actually have a compiled execute. Hey, troubleshooting, going full circle. That I think, again, just this iterative process of going through and filling gaps. So I put this slide in that I wanted to say that
Testing.
while
Mm.
this is going to be a first, like this is it's good, but I'm all excited to see what the impact is of the rollout of over the next year. You're talking about that Unreal 5 is going to be out,
Hmm.
and doing a second like next summer. I mean, part of the reason for making so many videos is that I can pull the ones out that just don't longer they no longer exist in certain areas. Add a few, and then also from the feedback of the first that you're going to take. Mark said he was going to take the class, and so
Hmm.
iterate. You got to be able to make sure that when you're building a game or you're building a course, you got to be able to iterate on it in order to make it awesome. As
Yep. I'm
Especially-
looking forward to the class.
great, thanks. Yeah, I wanted to make sure just to say thanks to Epic and family for supporting me. Like, I'm getting up at part of it. I have a 5-year-old daughter, so I'm like getting up, sneaking downstairs at 4:30 in the morning sometimes to do recording. So otherwise, there's mysterious sounds that are in the other room sometimes. Like, my students have been amazing. It's same with the support team and my colleagues too.
Thanks for
And
coffee.
thanks to you guys for having me here.
One question for you just before we try and wind up. There's an awful lot of educators here, and I think they're all excited about it as well. In what way do you think this can actually help people who are delivering classes? Do you think just as a resource to learn things and to share with perhaps colleagues that haven't come to terms with Unreal yet? Or are there other ways in which you can see this influencing other people's teaching?
Great question.
Yeah. I would. I think so. The Marla Schweppe designed our initial curriculum. She was the person who launched 3D digital design, and she created this experimental digital workshop, which in our curriculum, which allowed us to do soft rollouts. And so I would encourage professors who are a little bit worried about the nature of being a professor is changing, I think, and being able to throw down content and be like, hey, let's do a class, and I'm just going to say, like, here's these tutorials. I'm sort of a few steps ahead of you because I've done them, but don't expect me to know the workflows. I can and then just because that's I would say, yeah, to any professor who's thinking about it or feeling insecure about it, it's going to be and maybe making an an experimental workshop that gives yourself the opportunity to have a rough around the edges class.
Cool. Awesome.
There are also terminology sheets, and what are the other components of the so there's videos, but what else people expect as they're going through the material?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's tons of vocabulary sheets, and then there's for each chapter there's a PowerPoint and the flip PowerPoints, but they're super they're hyper threaded with lots and lots of information. I mean, going through, so these will be downloadable and available from the both from edX, but I'm also going to upload these with links to my Google Drive. So some people who are taking the class internationally don't always have access to Google Drive. So
Mhm.
that was sort of informed about that. But those who are can grab this stuff and all these. I mean, I think being aware of some of the rule systems that are connected to that are that Epic Games are like, like, hey, now we're ready for like Hollywood. That blew me away, and also sort of had me modifying some of my workflows with the lookup table stuff. But yeah, some of the lens effects, and then usually at the end of each of these PDFs, so these could be useful for teaching, but and I think that's perfectly. That's great. Like I think it's great when you can fill gaps and then provide students with more and more resources.
So really
Yeah.
valuable. If you're an instructor and you're going
Oh.
through in-class material, you can use this to go in class and and use it as a flipped learning model, right? So you can assign
Yeah.
this material and have your students go through the material and then come back and discuss it in class or do projects afterwards based on some of the content.
Yep. These slides look absolutely amazing and will be an
Thank you.
absolute godsend for a lot of people.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
great.
much work that people are talking about. How much
Oh,
work you
great.
did here. Are there any specific questions that you guys saw coming through that Sean should answer? Are there any questions that you all have in the chat there that you want to toss Sean's way?
And
A lot of
is it-
gratitude.
Yeah,
Oh,
lots
great.
of
Is it-
gratitude.
Should I stop sharing? Or
I'm
Or-
sure.
We're back.
We're back. This is a strange thing because honestly, there's hardly any questions. I think people are just thrilled by it. Are you seeing any questions, Tom?
No, not really. There's been,
Yeah.
you know what's happening with our stream these days is we cannot answer the questions fast enough because our community answers all of the questions. Even
great.
I know,
someone
it's awesome.
scraped they copied your URL for the mind map and threw it up in chat. So that's out there, baby.
That's great. That's
They're so
great.
fast.
They're so fast and they're so on it.
Cool.
Yeah, this is really cool. This is really fantastic to see this kind of stuff. And it's something that I think we've only got a few more minutes here, but I want to touch on kind of something really key with how this came to be. And it's something that we encourage a ton when we talk to educators, and they're like, "Hey, how can Epic help out?" And one of the ways we help out is with a program called Mega Grants, which is a grant program. You apply, say, "Hey, I've got a cool thing, and we might give you some money." And we encourage educators quite often, like, "Hey, we want this stuff out there. We need people learning. We can't create it all." And we know that creating this stuff, Sean, this was not an easy thing to make.
No.
This is a lot of content. And it's not just
work,
you had to build this content, you had to learn all of these systems yourself. And that's a huge undertaking. And so we recognize that can't be done by you're not going to do that after dinner every night. There's no way you're going to get through it. And so one of the ways we can help people like Sean and people in the audience who want to do something like this and want to build this, build curriculum and help the community out like this, we'll really encourage you to apply for a mega grant to help you achieve that, because that's part of why they're there. We give mega grants out for all sorts of things, but certainly one of those things is I need time to develop a curriculum. We understand that time is very expensive and is very, as an educator, you have no time. there's all that educating to be done.
Absolutely.
So learning a new tool and then building a curriculum for it it's a huge undertaking, and we want to be able to support that. And especially if it means that it can end up in a place where people can use it for free and can access it freely. That just means that knowledge gets to explode into the world, and that's what we're looking for. So if you're building things like this, or you're thinking, I have this skill set and this knowledge and I want to put this out there, but I've got, a day job or whatever, please consider those mega grants.
I'll put the link in the into the stream if I can get back to the stream. 1 second.
I mean, it's totally, I was really happy to be able to put this together, and it's really in some ways self-serving. I want to build, like Louis mentioned, I want to build a knowledge base of students starting at the sophomore year so they can join me at, doing some of these. There's so much amazing potential with VR, AR, virtual production, and getting that base of knowledge ripe so that, like, right now we get the students when junior, senior year, and then they graduate. So, it'd be great to get a student a little bit earlier and then keep longer. So.
Brilliant stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm even more excited now.
Thank you so much for having me on the.
No, it's been really a treat to have you. And, once again, the course comes out and becomes officially available on August 25th. And, there are some questions about the certifications associated with it. So, you can take the course and get a certification. Do you want to mention anything, any more additional details about how that'll work?
Yeah, there's, making sure you go through if you want the certification, some people like to make sure that they've locked in that knowledge by proving it in some way. And some depending on what institution, right? I mean, edX is started by Harvard and MIT. So like the fact that, it might have that stamp might be useful for as a credential, right? For some people. And so yeah, there's, there's discussion forums, and then there's also the quizzes and the projects and through.
Right. And that's a paid component. Of course, it's completely free if you don't choose that paid component, and you can just enroll and start taking advantage of all John's great work. Well, it is that magic time for the stream today, and we want to thank you again for sharing all this great knowledge, and we look forward to having you back because we know you're working on some more goodness. And I want to thank again Tom and Mark for all your great insights today and helping to answer questions in the chat. And we want to thank you guys all for coming and participating with us. And we really hope you take advantage of all this, great learning that Sean has developed. And we hope you support him and, continue to, take full advantage of the great stuff we're doing here on the stream and continue to encourage great guests like Sean to come on. So thank you all, and we hope you have a safe weekend, and we will see you next Friday. And thank you again for joining us, and stay safe, and see you soon.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye.